On Sunday, it was announced by Jendai Fraser, the president's top envoy for Africa, that the Bush administration would not support the power-sharing deal in Zimbabwe, namely the unity government between President Robert Mugabe and Morgan Tsvangirai as his prime minister. Tsvangirai, leader of the British-directed Movement for Democratic Change, the MDC party, was promoted to overthrow Mugabe in the highly British-manipulated election last March. The Bush administration's Fraser, endorsing the line from British Foreign Office's Lord Mark Malloch-Brown, said that the administration does not believe that Mugabe could share power. Now, this line is being repeated throughout the press today, misquoting President Mugabe as saying, "Zimbabwe is mine." In truth, the president stated, quote, "Zimbabwe is mine, I am a Zimbabwean. Zimbabwe for Zimbabweans, Zimbabwe never for the British, Britain for the British," end quote. The Bush administration further emphasized that it will not extend any aid to Zimbabwe as long as Mugabe is president. Presently, the nation is racked with economic instability, a worsening food crisis, and a deadly outbreak of cholera, all largely due to the decade-long genocidal sanctions and IMF conditionalities imposed on the nation, not, as the British Foreign Office insists, due to the leadership of that nation. 3 months ago, following the Zimbabwe elections, agreements for a unity government were reached after careful negotiations by the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, with the support of the leaders of the South African development community. Now, the United States is playing a leading role in an otherwise British Commonwealth grouping of the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and France, calling for the ouster of Robert Mugabe and overriding the sovereign agreement of the African nations. When briefed on these developments, Lyndon LaRouche stated that we know exactly what these policies are: British racist genocide. He continued that what we are dealing with is a British-directed attempt at genocide which, while sharply focused in the case of Zimbabwe, is typical of British colonial policy in Africa. The British Empire and its accomplices are continuing to conduct a policy of genocide in Africa and using every technique in the book of colonial methods. This accelerated attack on Zimbabwe follows shortly after the British Foreign Office's Lord Malloch-Brown made an emergency one-day visit to South Africa to pressure the leadership to join a campaign against Mugabe. LPAC and EIR have thoroughly documented Lord Malloch-Brown as a leading figure in the racist genocide efforts against Black Africa, and a key sponsor of Nazi protege George Soros, whose International Crisis Group recently proposed a privately sponsored coup against the elected government. Having been threatened and offended by Mugabe's determination to eliminate British colonialism from the soil of Zimbabwe, as exemplified by his Land Reform Act in the year 2000, the British Empire has since reacted by strangling Zimbabwe's economy through escalating economic sanctions and targeting Mugabe for removal. To combat the recent demands from the British Foreign Office and London press to cut off food and medical aid to Zimbabwe in order to manufacture a popular upheaval against leadership, Tomás Salomão, the executive director of the South African Development Community, announced on Sunday that it would provide a humanitarian aid package to Zimbabwe, including $30 million worth of seed, fertilizer, and fuel to bolster the nation's agricultural sector. Salomão said, quote, "This is regional solidarity. When you are facing difficulties, you have to count on the solidarity of your brothers. We cannot fail in assisting Zimbabwe. That's the critical and most important thing," end quote. LaRouche emphasized that we must take a strong position, that the truth on the ground in Africa, from the Zimbabwe crisis to the destabilizations in Congo and the recent International Criminal Court intervention into Sudan, is all British genocide. He concluded that the British must be brought to account for genocide, especially Malloch-Brown, the close associate of Soros. He must be promptly held to account on his part for open declaration of genocide, and anyone who is associated with that is playing a part in genocide.